Hi, Geeta.
Hi, thank you. Welcome everyone. Welcome to a sponsored webinar by SAP, hosted by CPA Australia, automating spend management to create a level. My name is Geeta Balakrishnan, and I'm a policy advisor for policy and advocacy at CPA Australia. We have people joining us from all over the country at today's webinar. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners from around Australia and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. I extend this acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people who may be joining us today. It is my pleasure to invite Fabian Cowell, Managing Director, SMB ANZ at SAP Concur, Noel David, Group Financial Controller at True Alliance, and Anne-Mary Monahan, Senior Solutions Consultant at SAP Concur. Today we will be taking questions through our Q&A box, and please direct the questions to all panelists. We will address the questions at the conclusion, and we will do our best with the time remaining. For any troubleshooting queries, please send a message to the host during the chat box. And it is now time for our session to commence, so I will hand it over to Fabian. Fabian. Hi, Fabian. I think you might be on mute.
What about now? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah,
can
we can hear you now.
You can, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a...
All right, great. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. So, hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. As you can see, in the past few days, so in the past year, it's likely your business has already started to minimize paper-based processes, and it's increased your cloud accessibility technology to help your employees get their jobs done from home. The need to update these processes became quite apparent when employees tried to process their invoices that were left in the office and weren't sure how to even submit expenses for home office management, and how to submit these after losing receipts even on the move. Now, these inefficiencies, they trickle up. If processes are delayed and you don't know what expenses are coming and how to manage them, you may reactively pay whatever invoices and expenses cross your desk. That makes it tough to reduce the costs when budgets are tight, or effectively invest when it's time to grow. Now it's time to increase the value of digital transformation by focusing on how you manage expense reports and vendor invoices. By putting solutions in place to take charge of spending, you can tackle spend uncertainty, bounce back better, and be more prepared for whatever comes your way. And for those in Melbourne, New South Wales, and now South Australia, today's probably a perfect example of the news of that. So SAP Concur Expense Solutions automate and integrates expense reporting, helping to simplify the expense management process from reporting to approvals to reimbursement. And Concur Invoice helps streamline and automate invoice management, from purchase requests through to payment, reducing processing time and allowing you to delay payment, optimizing your strategies. Now today, I'm really excited to be joined by one of our customers, Noel David. He's the Group Financial Controller for True Alliance. In this Q&A discussion, we will discuss the journey that Noel and his team took to make spend management automation possible within his organization, and some of the challenges and key benefits from the journey. Noel. Hi, Noel, are you there?
Morning. Yes. Hi, Fabian.
Hi, mate. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you. Very well. So, Noel, can you tell us a little bit about your business and your role in the organization?
Yeah. So good morning, all. So I'm the Group Financial Controller at True Alliance. who is True Alliance? We sound like a insurance broker or insurance company. We're actually not. We're actually more cooler than that. We run 23 international fashion brands like Lacoste, Under Armour, Speedo, Coach, North Face. So quite reputable brands in the market, which I'm sure everyone's had a piece of our inventory in the past. We trade across, we're an omni-channel business. So we trade in retail outlets, online and wholesale. So if you go to Myers or David Jones, our inventory is sold there. And we also trade across Australia and New Zealand. So we're the licensed distributor for these brands across the country. I think what's really relevant to everybody today, each of our brands are operated as a separate entity. So due to the requirements of privacy and there's some competitiveness between brands, we're required to have those walls in between brands. And I think, you know, as every business is, we're a very complex business, and every brand you can imagine, from Speedo to Coach, we've got different customers, different nuances. So the challenges become complex as an organization for us.
So how did you manage then employee expenses and invoices prior to automation?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a very, very good question. I mean, we've got around 170 people in our organization that actually deal with expenses and invoices. That's people directly working in that kind of area. Our business is around 1,000 people. You know, we're a 38-year-old company, so you can imagine we have some old school processes within the business that have been matured and have worked for a very long time. I guess being I guess pre-COVID, being a brand that's always overseas, traveling, it was really difficult to manage our expense and invoice process, because we adopted the typical staple and sticky tape method to a piece of paper method for expenses. And then from our invoice perspective, we used to have piles of paper, filing cabinets everywhere, fancy spreadsheets, you know, all these processes of scanning, emailing to staff. So the challenges we faced, not only from a physical perspective, was also, you know, from a record keeping perspective, the challenges we're facing is, you know, incorrect coding, classical missing receipts, not being able to split cost centers and many allocations of costs across GLs and cost centers. We didn't have the ability to fill in attendee forms for events for FBT purposes. You know, the timing on invoices and expense submissions were long. And I guess the admin of capturing invoices into our ERP, which we run SAP, was very time consuming for our AP team. So, and it was error prone as well.
All right, great. What were you aiming to achieve then by implementing a spend management automation strategy? And in addition to that, what were some of the key challenges that prompted you to automate the financial process?
Yeah, I guess this is quite interesting, because when people ask me what were you aiming to achieve, usually, you know, finance people will have the finance hat on, and it's the achievement for the finance team. But actually, it's quite inverse to that. The main objective for us was to give all our users that are actually inputting information, the most important part of the process, a modern tool and process. So, and that's been a huge thing for us. And, you know, it's also given, obviously, our AP team a tool to support and inform their process digitally. So they're able to understand where paper and processes are in the digital network. So some of the key challenges we were facing also was that our vendor list was growing, and we had more travelers at the time, especially, which meant that we needed to increase headcounts in our AP team to manage this. Okay. We constantly add brands, which was also adding more pressure to us to add headcounts within our team.
Yeah.
And you know, the agility and not worrying about growth impacts on the team is really important. So yeah, that's some of the challenges. And sorry, that was really our strategy as to why we need to automate our process.
Okay. All right. You know what we might do? I've got 3 more questions for you, Noel. But what we might do is take a little break, and we're going to send a poll out to our audience with some questions. Okay. So in front of you, you should see what is a key area of focus for your finance team in the next 6 to 12 months. If you could answer one of them three. Okay, interesting. Very interesting. I'm not sure if everyone can see those results, but the majority of the answers came in for C, for both. All right, Noel, I'll come back to you with the next question. What are the benefits your finance team and overall business have realized after implementing the automated spend management?
Yeah. So this one was not a tough one to answer, but I think there are so many benefits. So I tried to nail them into three kind of areas. I think the first and most important for me, I think in any process in any business is workflow. I think the Concur workflow is one of the best. I'll advocate for it, and it's amazing. It's given my team such an amazing upper hand and advantage. There's no longer the stress needed to understand where things are and went. And then from number two, for me, finance compliance. The platform has enabled transparency for accountants and added some very robust controls.
Okay.
We are easily able to identify from month end what is still in the workflow, which is, I think, a game changer for us, and we're able to make the appropriate accruals into our accounting system to enable our business to have the accurate picture from an accounts perspective. And from a controls perspective, and I think this is super powerful, we have a host of controls and alerts within Concur. So it allows a user, for example, I'll just give a few examples so everyone understands. We're able to build controls to say we're wrongly coding stuff, we're breaching a policy, or we're trying to submit duplicate invoices. That's filtering out a lot of mistakes, and we're managing by exception rather than a rule. And third, I think from a company perspective and outside of finance, our teams love it. I think if you try to do anything outside of Concur, the first comment is, can I just do this in Concur? The Concur system is app friendly. So for those that like to travel and don't like to open a PC, it notifies you when to do stuff, which I think is amazing. It will prompt you and it'll say that there's things are due, and it'll escalate also automatically. And they don't need to ask what to do next because the platform enables those steps. We've set it up in such a way, I guess, we've limited as much burden on the user as possible. Okay. So we've tried to bring in as much drop lists where they define to the user rather than going for a whole master list of master data. So we've able to do that. And I think one of the key things I've always mentioned why we're successful with our Concur implementation is we've created familiarity. We rolled out the expense module for credit cards in 2017. Then we decided to also roll out invoice a year later. And then we also rolled out travel and purchase requests. Mm-hmm. The guys are so familiar with the platform that the training effort was nothing for us when we rolled out the second to the fourth module, because everyone was familiar as to what Concur looks like and how Concur works. And all the modules look similar and works in a similar way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. It's one of the things that we come across quite regularly is the change management. And with any kind of change, of course, the initial transition becomes quite challenging until it's up and running. And then they realize how much easier it is to use. But there's always that initial, and we always say for the first maybe 2 or 3 months, when that rollout first occurs, is when you'll probably hear most of the noise. But it's like one step backwards to take many steps forward. And it's great to hear that as you added more modules, that then the transition and change period for that became less. and less because it is effectively on the same platform. Interesting to see how the expense classifications and categories go now that people aren't traveling as much. What we're seeing is those expenses are now becoming more out-of-home type expenses. So how was that automation supported, or how has automation supported your business during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think this is the most powerful, and I think Fab, you opened up on the South Australia lockdown in New South Wales and Melbourne naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've had Concur before the lockdown, so we had all our 4 modules before 2019 or 20. So for us, the impact was 0, and that's the truth. Our people were obviously we're all working from home. Concur is as simple as having an internet connection. There's no requirement for VPNs or internet networks. Anybody can do it, work anywhere. We've had people where they've gone overseas in the past because of family matters that worked from overseas. So there's no issue from that perspective, from a work from home perspective. But I think from a soft skills perspective or an encouragement from a work-life balance, we've seen in our AP team being able to be agile using Concur. They've been able to work from home since the pandemic, and they haven't been required to come back to the office. So, they come in 1 day a week just to, have the regular mingle with people to just keep that connection, but they don't need to be in the office and present. And I think the enabler of that is also they can work at any time they want. They can see what's in the pipeline. They can see the work that's going to be approved in the pipeline. And I mean, to see work-life balance in AP is rare to me because of the sheer volume. And mainly that volume usually comes from the seasonal volumes where there's just an influx of invoices because of year end or the start of the budget, whatever it is. It's always created that bottleneck in the team. And, they always deal with it 100%. But I think it's time for these guys to also have that work-life balance.
Yeah, that's something that we've been challenged with, to be honest, because we used to have such an in-office attendee that now when it says work from home, and we have, and a lot of my business, there are certain groups that are quite young, so it's very new to them to have to work from home full time as we have it at the moment. And although we can work, and we've shown that we can work from home remotely, it does. We do miss that social interaction, and I'm not talking about just being in the kitchen and asking how the weekend was. It's hearing that office, over partition conversation where you hear someone ask a question or they talk about something, especially for the newest people in the business, where you don't get that at home. You don't get to feel and see body language, and we're starting to see over a period of time. There's now been more than 12 months. That's actually starting to have an impact, not so much on our top line revenue business, not on that, but more so just on the individuals themselves, and them having to form new habits, or they form new habits that they need to break. And we're in a situation now where we're trying to understand what is the right balance, which we're yet to find. I do have another poll question, Noel, before your last one. And it should be up on the screen there if people can see it, saying why spend management is an important area for your finance teams. And as we do wrap up this last question with you, Noel, I might even throw in a third poll question, and that will set up a whole lot of Q&A, hopefully, at the end of this for all our attendees. So get prepared for a few questions that might come both of our ways, actually. And I won't catch you by surprise, Noel. I may even ask you a bonus question.
Nice. Can't wait for it.
Okay, we'll move into the last question. I think most people have responded. Yeah, okay. So I've got one last one. I lie. I do have two for you, Noel. So any key learnings you'd like to share with the organisations that are considering automating their own financial processes as part of their digital transformation strategy?
Yeah. Obviously, what I've implemented outside of Concur, I've implemented a lot of systems outside of Concur, and I think the same rule always applies. Is about not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. You know, one of the key, I don't want to say mistakes, but one of the key learnings I had, at least on implementing Concur at the time, was the AP process generally in all organizations is a very mature process. It's not new. And, you know, there's certain ways of doing things, there's certain ways of proving things and all that. You know, when I look at Concur and how it's built, my view is the process is best practice and the result's always going to be the same, but with more controls. I think one of the initial mistakes we made was we were trying to implement our old methods into Concur. And if I revert back to what Fabian said earlier about the noise in the first 3 months, the noise we got from the first 3 months was we were duplicating our work, trying to replicate our method and also the new Concur method. And we quickly realized that was our error and our ways of doing things. So that's one thing I do recommend is really have a clear objective as to where you want to get and then work backwards from there. And absolutely, I think some of the things I did as well was I was reached out to other peers within the industry that had rolled out Concur. At the time, Invoice was a bit rarer, so it was more difficult, but from an expense perspective, and we were able to learn from them. So that's one of my key learnings. And you know, we have probably one of the most complex businesses in the fashion industry, being 23 diverse businesses. You know, complex reporting. So we require a system like Concur to give us that scalability. So absolutely do your homework before you try to implement Concur.
Yeah. All right, and the last one. So what are your plans from here? What kind of projects are you looking to expand in the area of financial automation?
Yeah, from a finance perspective, we've basically implemented everything Concur has to give us. So that's a tick for us, and we've automated that process. We are now looking at data lakes and how do we store our data efficiently. I think data is a very important and key enabler for our business. Knowing your customers is a very, very important part of how we sell to our customers. And then we're also looking at how do we automate our AR, accounts receivable solutions, as we've got a very extensive wholesale business in our stable. So that's kind of where we're heading. Absolutely investing in technology. We're always at the forefront of technology. We use best of class all the time, and I think we consider Concur as best of class, and that's why we've used their services.
Yeah, I couldn't have scripted that ending there. Noel, thank you for that. I'm going to pass over to another poll question, which you should see in front of you now. So what is the biggest gap area in AP efficiency for your businesses? Yeah, so Noel, thanks for that. I think one of the things that we've noticed, and maybe to give a tiny bit of background into the spans of my business, we look after all businesses from 5 employees right up to thousands and thousands of employees. The biggest impact and the greatest, let's call it revenue generator for my business is actually businesses that have less than 200 employees. And when you think about what's happened in the last 12 months, in particular with COVID, the largest impact I see is right down the bottom of small business. I know that we talk about, and you see in the news how it impacts small business, but it's incredible when we really look at the data and analysis behind it, how big of an impact it is. Because these small businesses don't typically have large groups of IT and HR and the like that will help them support. We have lots of businesses where the owner or the MD or the CEO or CFO is wearing multiple hats. So it's going to be really interesting, to be honest, to see how this latest this latest news of COVID and the lockdowns again, effectively we're back to where we were last year. How that's going to impact businesses and whether they are, and obviously we have businesses attending this webinar, so it'd be really interesting to, would have been really interesting to get their thoughts on whether people are now prepared and they're going to move forward with it, or whether there's a hell of a lot of anxiety and they're unsure of how to move forward. You know, a lot of the conversations that we have with people and businesses is around immediate action as opposed to what's going to be happening in the next 4 to 6 months. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens post today's news and how things eventuate over the next week or two. But no, thanks again for that. For people online, I'm about to hand over to Anne-Marie, who's my team lead for our solutions consulting team, who's about to take you through a demonstration of Concur.
Thank you, Fab. I'm just going to share my screen and I'll jump into the product and I'll actually take you through and hopefully align this to some of the issues and successes that Concur had with True Alliance and that Noel mentioned. So let me just minimize this. So hopefully everyone should be able to see the Concur invoice landing page on the screen in front of you. One of the things that Noel touched on was the ability to be able to track and see invoices in the Concur platform. What you're seeing in front of you at the moment is the Concur Invoice Manager screen. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is an interactive dashboard where I can really track the individual invoices that are being received into the Concur platform. Concur will basically pull those in from your AP email address. If you're still one of those businesses, which we have many of, that are still getting hard copy invoices in, they may just be a few, but you can scan those and send those into the system also. When the invoices get picked up and they're being pulled into Concur, they will go through the OCR technology, so that optical character recognition, where we scan the information, we pull it from the invoice and we populate it in the Concur platform. At that point, we will then just verify the invoice, ensure the information is being captured correctly, and if any information has been omitted, we will add that in using a technique that will ensure that the system will remember where information is being picked up. So there's artificial intelligence in the background. But at a starting point, any of those invoices that get captured and pulled into Concur, you can easily track them. So at the moment, I've got a number of unapproved invoices that are sitting out in the business. I can drill down and have a look at where those are sitting, which particular approvers they're with, and I can account for those very easily. Got invoices that are sitting with invoice owners, and I've got a number of invoices that actually are unassigned, haven't actually been allocated out to an invoice owner. And then I have my unverified capture. So when I mentioned pull the invoices into the Concur platform, the hope is that the OCR will do work its magic and actually pick up on those pieces of information that are required and will automatically populate that information in the Concur platform. On my right, I have my invoice, which is just taking a little while to highlight. That's already come in. It's been scanned. It's been captured the information that we needed to. We can see line items, so I'll actually just make that a little bit bigger. So we can see the individual line items that are being captured. So I have a number of line items there that are being captured. It's already pulled that information across. So it's identified supplier, it's pulled in the line item description per those individual invoices, the quantity and the unit price, and it's reconciled that back to the overall invoice total. In the invoice details, so not looking at the actual line item detail, the invoice details have also been captured. So we can easily see the invoice information that's being captured. And in this case, it's been captured perfectly. If I wanted to pick up additional information that had been missed, all I would do is right-click in the field that I want to populate and then right-click on the data that I want to bring across and save it. In that instance, the system would then recognize where the information is being picked up from, and the next time that invoice is being received, it would automatically be looking in that area for that additional information. A little red line to the left means that that particular field is required, so mandatory information that needs to be populated before the invoice can be allocated out to the business. The Supplier information has been recognised and pulled in. Now, Noel did mention that one of the issues that they had as a business was increasing number of new suppliers coming through. You can control the invoices coming in. So if an invoice comes in and there's no supplier there, then this will flag an exception. So you'll need to actually manage it. So any new suppliers would need to be approved. Otherwise, the invoices will need to be managed by exception and dealt with. And until that supplier is being created, they can't be released for payment. But in this case, everything has been captured perfectly. And that's not always the case, but it is in this instance. The expense type has been populated. Now that expense type is based on the supplier information. It is in no way linked to the line item description. It's defaulted based on the supplier information. So logic tells us that City Hi-Fi, our predominant spend with them is for computing equipment. So it's defaulted that. If I wanted to make a change to that, I would just click on the drop-down list and select an alternate expense type that makes sense for that particular line item. We also have an assigned to. So in this case, it's defaulted based on the supplier. We have an assigned to that is essentially the invoice owner, the person who's responsible for ordering this equipment. They will then need to review and code this. So I'm going to save any changes I made, and I'm going to submit it, and it's going to automatically go through a workflow and take it to that particular individual. So I'll just scroll down so you can see everything that's being captured, and then I'm going to submit it out to the individual user. Everything that you see and you get access to in the Concur platform is role-driven and permission-driven. So I'm going to log out as an administrator. So I'm going to have a very different look and feel when I log in as an end user. And that's going to control. So my login controls what I get access to. In this scenario, we've got everything. We've got a full suite of all the core modules that Concur offers, but I'm going to focus on my invoices. We'll look at expense in a minute, and we'll take you through what that looks like in the mobile application. But the last invoice that I should have received was the one that we were looking at an AP level. So if I go into City Hi-Fi, at this point, because it's been allocated out to myself as an individual, it's picked up my default accounting string. So you notice now, while previously we had allocated computing equipment as the expense type, it now has a distribution code against it. And that distribution code's been allocated to the individual line items. So if I drag this up a bit, you'll see that the individual line items are being allocated a distribution code. I can change that if I wanted to, but that's basically my default distribution code. So my profile defines where I sit in the business, and it's added that up automatically. I can edit it, I can change it, and when Noel talked about controls around where you can cost it to and how you can segregate the different units in the business, you control what your users have the access to in terms of where they can cost to. You can lock that down or open it up to whatever level you need to as a business. But I can make changes there, or I can simply just review my information, have a look at my invoice, and submit it. There's a workflow in the background that is going to essentially define where that goes to. So I don't need to worry about who's responsible for approving it. All I really need to do is ensure that it is submitted and submitted in a timely fashion. I'm going to bring across my mobile. Just bear with me while I open this up. So now this is the Concur mobile application. So just try and get in there. Essentially, we're going to look at expense and we're looking at the approvals on the mobile. We find that the invoice piece is very much desktop driven, but the expense and all approvals can be accessed and implemented on the mobile application. So it just means that your users can access this easily while they're on the go. They don't need to be in the office. Now, the approval side of things, if I go in and have a look at my approvals, I have multiple approvals that are pending my action. I've purchase requests, I've invoice approvals, and I've also got expense approvals. So if I go into my invoice approvals, I can scroll down and I can see my the last one that was received was that City Hi-Fi one. So I can see very quickly on my summary screen various indications of information. I can look at my line item information, and I can obviously see the image. I can click and scroll in on that. So I'm in no way inhibited by accessing the invoice on the mobile. I still have the same visibility I would have on the desktop. I just have the ease of being able to access it on the mobile. I can send it back, or I can approve it. I approve it, that will now be removed from my list. And from all intents and purposes, there's nothing further that's required from the individual to action that. Obviously, I could send it back. We do have a budget mobile that I can reference if I wanted to check it against my budget and potentially send the invoice back and ask them to, well, resubmit it within the next budget period, but that may not be practical. In addition to having access to approvals for the mobile, or for the invoices, I also have approvals for expenses. So you'll notice that I've got a couple of different expense reports at the very top. If I want to go in and have a look at those in more detail, I have one here that's got a few soft warnings against it. So if I look at my alerts, I can see that there's some minibar charges on one of these line items, and I've got a combination of a few different transactions. I've got some car rental, I've got a hotel charge. Now, if I drill down and look at the hotel charge, it's flagging to say that there's an alert there. If I look at my itemizations, I'll be able to see in more detail where specifically that alert applies to. If I scroll down, I'll see that there's a couple of minibar charges that are outside of policy. So it's basically flagging a policy alert. It's a soft warning. It's not going to stop me from submitting it, but it is making me aware of the fact that that's actually outside of policy. So in this case, as an approver, I have the option to return that and send it back to the approver and question why they've put that through. I can see any receipts in the background. So I've got a couple of car hire transactions that have receipts against them. I can drill down and look at those in more detail. But from an approvals point of view, unless I want to actually, oh, can no one see my, I can just see some comments there. Apologies, it doesn't seem like people can see my mobile. Let me reshare. And apologies, I should have picked up on that sooner. Can somebody confirm that you can now see mobile?
Yep, we can see that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. So you will have missed the fact that I went in and I approved an invoice. So I'll just quickly go back and show that again. I've got a few examples in here, obviously, so you're not missing out. So this is actually a very similar invoice to the last one. I can see summary details. I can see line item details. The first one's actually telling me that there's been a cross allocation on that particular line. So there's a little icon in there that is telling me that it's being coded to somewhere other than the actual default distribution. I can see the invoice image. I can approve this. And then we'll go through either it'll automatically go through ready for extraction, or it will go through to your AP team to have a final view over before they actually process it. In addition to having invoices, I've got purchase requests, I've got requests for travel in here, but I've also got expense reports. So we do have an expense report in here for this. I touched on, you heard the dialogue, but you didn't see the actual screen. So I mentioned that there was a minibar charge in there. If I scroll down and look at the individual line items for this particular hotel bill, I'll see in the itemization that there's actually been some flags that have triggered around individual line items there that were minibar charges. So it just goes back to what Noel was saying in terms of being able to drive compliance within the business and flag certain types of spend. Those audit rules will be able to guide your users in terms of what they, what's inside policy, what's outside of policy. As an approver, I have the ability to send this back. I'm going to send it back and I'm going to question minibar charges. Now the user will get notification and they'll be able to see the comment that I added to that when it goes back to them. But that's the approval side of things. While I'm in here as an approver, I also just wanted to touch on the expense capture piece as well. So while I'm an approver, I obviously incur my own expenses, and I have an open claim that's currently sitting there. I'm going to add a receipt to that very quickly. So I'm just going to capture this receipt. It's as long as it's relatively clear, the system will do its work. It's picked up the amount, it's picked that up correctly. It's going to process that. It shouldn't take a minute. It'll say it'll take up to a minute, but it shouldn't take a minute. As soon as it's finished processing, I should get a little ping notification. So I'm getting a picture now of the receipt there to say it's scanned. If I go in and have a look at the information that's being captured, I've got the receipt in the background. I've got the expense type, date, I've got supplier information there. And I'm going to move that to my Open July expense claim. If you have a corporate card feed coming through from the bank, that will come through nightly. And where there's a a receipt and a line item from the credit card, they will automatically merge. So if I just refresh my expense, so you'll notice now it's just refreshed. That Coogee Wine Room, the first transaction that we see there, beneath the $282 amount, you'll see it as a little credit card icon and a receipt icon. So if I drill down and look at that in more detail, I'll be able to see that receipt that I just captured. So that's in the background. I can drill down and look at that in more detail. I can see it's already coded it to business meals attendees as an expense type. I could change that if I wanted to. I could add a business purpose, but all of that information is being captured. It's already merged with the corresponding credit card receipt. Now, the one thing I do need to do as a user, if I look at this flag, it's prompting me, well, it's making me, because it's a red warning message, it's telling me I need to add an attendee. So if I go in and I look at the attendees, it's already added myself as an attendee. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to add a business guest, and I'm going to say, good old Joe from ABC. I'm going to save that. So this goes back to what Noah was saying about being able to capture attendees for FBT purposes. I've now been able to allocate that very quickly and easily to a business guest. In the background is a configuration that will take care of displaying what the FBT liability around that is. But for all intents and purposes, I've now addressed that requirement, and it's removed the red flag from the business meals transaction. But if I scroll down, there's a secondary transaction there, and it's a duplicate. So this is obviously not something that you want to find that you're processing. I was actually asking for attendees, but it's a duplicate as well. So what I'll do, rather than let this go through, I will remove that from the expense report. And then as long as you've captured everything that you need to, you've coded it as you needed to, and you've filled out any of the additional information that's required, you can simply submit that. Again, there's a workflow in the background that will define where this goes to, and that will update now to submission pending approval. So there's no further action from me as a user. I've captured the information I needed to, and it's now been taken care of, and it's gone to my manager. My manager will get a notification. They can go in and access it on the mobile, and that's how easy it is to capture your expenses and process your invoices. That's it from me.
Oh, Anne-Marie, thank you so much for that. I'm going to hand over to Geeta now for some Q&A.
All right, thank you, Fabian, thank you, Noel, thank you, Anne-Marie. We've got a couple of questions that's come through the Q&A. The first one is from Julia for Noel. And earlier Noel mentioned, that he had looked at a few other solutions and came up with Concur being the best. So the question here was, when saying Concur has the best workflow, how did you arrive at that conclusion? What were the standout features? What other programs did you look at and decide that this was it?
Yep. So how we derived to that conclusion is, as I mentioned, our business is complex. We've got 23 diverse brands, and workflows. I guess any workflow can work, no doubt about it. But it's not just about the workflow. It's about the controls through that workflow. And I think what was just presented earlier, the demonstration, was that we're able to put rules and controls where we can escalate where spend management has been exceeded or even coding has been incorrectly coded. So for us, I don't recall I don't recall the names of these businesses we went through, but we derived that having 23 diverse brands and being able to allocate workflows where a person may work for Lacoste and Speedo but have two different reports. We need that flexibility. So that's how we came up with that solution, I guess, for us to use Concur.
All right, thank you. The next question is for Fab. You mentioned earlier that you've seen a lot of impact, especially for small businesses, in terms of adopting automation. Just what kind of companies, in particular size or industry, are making the greatest advancements in the area of finance automation from your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually looked at this recently, and our year on year, we look at the industries that we have the greatest impact in, or have their greatest impact with us. And there isn't one that typically stands out. Because we work across manufacturing right through to business services. And if I just pick those two, in the last 12 months, we've actually seen manufacturing, wholesale, become more prominent, especially in the invoicing side, where more of their admin teams were on site and now forced to be remote. Whereas we've seen with business services, who tend to be more technology advanced in the past, have been the biggest industries. So if we do just take the last 12 months, it's the wholesale manufacturing businesses that have become more prominent, but it's not much more than any of the other industries. But that's the one that may have been in our top 5 or 6 previously that are now in our top 3.
That is quite interesting. So in these industries that you do see, I mean, there are different sizes of firms. What have you found to be the challenges for small businesses in terms of automating their finance function?
Yeah, I think if we think about expense management for one, it's never really a core business function until it becomes a problem. In many cases, these small businesses, have, and COVID's forced this to look at technology as a priority rather as a second step to fix a process that they normally have. Now, most businesses and their core function isn't to submit expense reports, but as it's same with in invoices too, to a certain degree, invoices a little bit more advanced purely because you're now talking about a supplier network that we need to make sure is right. But when these businesses, the biggest challenges now is they were forced for their staff to become remote. And all of a sudden, those processes of being able to hold a piece of paper and then hand it to your colleague next to you was completely removed. So when we talk about visibility and transparency, it's not we don't want to use those terms to keep an eye on what people are doing. We really need to keep a track on the process, because when we start talking about supplier invoices, that now comes into the core of what keeps a business running. So they're probably the biggest things from a small business. I mentioned to Noel before that these small businesses a lot of them don't have large IT organizations within them to be able to do these advancements. A lot of these advancements in technology come either something's gone wrong or they've grown beyond what their current processes can handle. And so that's the main thing we're seeing in the let's call it the lower end of employee business sizes.
Thank you for that. So a few more questions have come through. I guess one is someone's asked, how does Concur integrate with ERP? Is that?
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest things that we need to ensure is that what we're doing at the front end talks to the financial system at the back. So we have many avenues to integrate into all types of systems, whether it be QuickBooks, MyOb, or right through to even larger ERP systems. There's a few ways to be able to do that without getting fully technical, but there's API connections or there's FTP connections straight in, but there's ways that we can connect into almost all the ERP systems.
Thank you, Fabian. This question is for Noel. What are some of the ways other companies from your industry are making a difference in the market using this kind of technology?
Other companies in our industry, sorry, explain that question once more.
So you've shared with us how you've used the technology to facilitate your operations. Are there other ways that the industry has been using this kind of technology in the finance function, or other technologies in this area to kind of just, be more efficient and effective?
Look, I don't know what other companies are doing. I'm not privileged. I've been with TrueLines for 9 years, so I think our competitors would like me to understand what they're doing. But I think I read a few important things during COVID is about how do you enable your staff working at home safely. And I think the word safely doesn't mean physically safely, but from a protection of intellectual property, which is data usually in most businesses. So what we're doing is we're continuing to look at how do we enable from a finance function to ensure that data is safely stored and not accessible to anybody. And I think, you know, if I use Concur and we're using other solutions for our accounts receivable solutions, we deem those as a safe solution and, you know, limiting access and all that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but I try my best on that one.
Thank you for that. There is one question here, another one for Noel, which is David's asking, you know, what other features would you like to see in terms of improvements to the current process that you already have, the current technology? What could make it better for you in terms of your operation?
I think if I just break down expenses, I think the expense module is very well advanced. I think the OCR technology that was demonstrated, the photo capturing, is just amazing. We even which I think we didn't go into too much detail, but I think there's a very big piece that the whole matching principle in Concur from the bank feed, and we've got multiple bank feeds. We run 2 other subsidiaries that have nothing to do with True Alliance, absolutely nothing to do with True Alliance. We run their businesses here in this country because they're too far away. They're in New York. They're a New York listed stock exchange, so they require the highest level of surety of the accounts we run from locally. So we, you know, having a tool that's absolutely accurate when it comes down to capturing expenses is key. From an accounts payable perspective, I think, you know, if I look back 4 years ago or 3 years ago when we implemented it, it was a bit of a in its growth stage. I think today the accounts payable module is really good. Again, going back to the workflows and the controls that we have in place, I think some important things when it comes down to, for example, setting up your master data within the accounts payable module, where you can say the stationery company that provides your company with stationery always gets coded to the stationery GL. So it's defaulted. You're not relying on users to make that decision, because at the end of the day, the users aren't financial accountants and they don't know what's required. So I think from that perspective, I think we've advanced from, if we looked at 3 years ago to now, we've advanced, we've utilized those functions, and we continue to look for solutions. I think when we talk about our next steps in True Alliance, we looked at how do we do our accounts receivable in reverse in Concur. Unfortunately, Concur does not have an accounts receivable module, so we had to go through another vendor. But obviously, if it did have the accounts receivable module, definitely would have been on our radar to have one platform for everything.
Thank you, Noel. Yeah, I was very glad that OCR feature as well. So quite good. Sorry, there's a couple of other questions that have come through around more of, you know, the operational ways of using Concur in terms of coding, and somebody wants information and slides about the system. Would you like to address those questions here, Fabian, or maybe would this be something, you know, they could contact you and you have that conversation with them, go into greater detail?
Yeah.
The specific, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Especially the integration one, because that's a more lengthy conversation to understand versions, the type of ERP system you have, the kind of cost structure you have, things like that. So that would be a much broader answer. I'm more than happy to take that question directly outside of here. And as for the slides, yeah, we'll definitely get some information back to them. Absolutely.
All right, great. I think I'd like to thank everyone once again. We're coming to the close. Thank you, Fabian. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thank you very much to all our attendees today as well. You know, please do reach out to Fabian and Anne-Marie. I think the contacts will be in the slides when they are shared through. Is that right?
Great. Thank you, Gita. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, everyone that attended.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Pass it back to you, Lauren.
Thanks.
Thank you, Geeta, Fabian, Noel, and Anne-Marie, and thank you everyone for your participation. In the next 3 working days, you will receive an evaluation survey accompanied by the recording of this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback as it is extremely valuable to CPA Australia to help us to deliver better events for you. Thanks again, and we look forward to welcoming you to another CPA Australia webinar soon.